protection services with the Wildwood Crest Volunteer Fire Company, number 1.
I move that a public hearing now be held on ordinance number 1334.
Seconded. Been moved and seconded that a public hearing on ordinance number 1334 now be held.
Roll call, Mrs. Gould.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Abstain.
And Mr. Cabrera.
Yes. Floor is open.
Hearing no comments from the floor, I move that the public hearing on ordinance number 1334 now be closed.
I'll second it. It has been moved and seconded that the public hearing on ordinance number 1334 now be closed.
Roll call, Mrs. Gould.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Abstain.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
I move ordinance 1334 be passed on second and final reading and advertised according to law.
I'll second the motion. It has been moved and seconded that the ordinance number 1334 be passed on second and final reading and advertised according to law.
Roll call, Mrs. Gould.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Abstain.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Okay, next we have ordinance 1335, and it's amending and supplementing Chapter 56 for recreation fees.
I move ordinance number 1335 be placed on second reading and final passage by title only.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that ordinance number 1335 be placed on second and final reading by title only.
Roll call, Mrs. Gould.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Ordinance 1335 reads as follows. An ordinance amending and supplementing Chapter 56 of the Code of the Borough of Wildwood Crest, entitled Recreation Commission, Section 56-3, approving and confirming rates and fees for the rental of facilities, participation in certain events, and activities.
I move that a public hearing now be held on ordinance number 1335.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that a public hearing on ordinance number 1335 now be held.
Roll call, Mrs. Gould.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes. Floor is open.
Hearing no comments from the public, I move that the public hearing on ordinance number 1335 now be closed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the public hearing on ordinance number 1335 now be closed.
Roll call, Mrs. Gould.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
I move that ordinance number 1335 be passed on second and final reading and advertised according to law.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that ordinance number 1335 be passed on second and final reading and advertised according to law.
Roll call, Mrs. Gould.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
And for the record, we now have 20 people in the group, sorry. Next is ordinance 1336, and it reads as follows. An ordinance amending and supplementing Chapter 32A, entitled Fees, Section 32A-1, Fees General of the Code of the Borough of Wildwood Crest, to provide for beach box rental fees.
I move that ordinance number 1336 be passed on first reading, advertised according to law, be brought up for second and final reading and public hearing on October 21, 2020 at 5:30 p.m.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that ordinance number 1336 be passed on first reading, advertised according to law, be brought up for second and final reading and public hearing on October 21st, 2020 at 5:30 p.m.
Roll call, Mrs. Gould.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Okay, next we have the resolutions. The first is authorizing a professional services contract with Michael A. Jadziniak of Carluccio, Leone, Diamond, Doyle, and Sachs LLC as special counsel for COA-related matters from September 2020 to December 2020.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the foregoing resolution be adopted. Roll call. Mrs. Gould.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Next is authorizing a shared services agreement with the Cape May County Municipal Utilities Authority for solid waste disposal and recycling services.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the foregoing resolution be adopted. Roll call. Mrs. Gould.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Next is authorizing release of escrow funds for street opening permit SO 19-0705 in the amount of $2.50.
So moved.
Second.
Resolution be adopted. Roll call. Mrs. Gould.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Next is authorizing release of escrow funds for street opening permit SO 19-0804 in the amount of $277.50.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the foregoing resolution be adopted. Roll call. Mrs. Gould.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Next is authorizing the sale of surplus property no longer needed for public use on an online auction website.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the foregoing resolution be adopted. Roll call, Mrs. Gould.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Next is designating trick-or-treat hours on October 31st, 2020, from 5 to 7 p.m.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the foregoing resolution be adopted. Roll call, Mrs. Gould.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Lastly is authorizing increase of contract amount to Star General Contracting Corporation for portable toilets.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the foregoing resolution be adopted. Roll call, Mrs. Gould.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes.
Next we have bills.
I move that all bills properly authorized be paid.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that all bills properly authorized be paid. Roll call, Mrs. Gould.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Cabrera.
Yes. Okay, that brings us to correspondence. Madam Clerk, do we have any correspondence?
No, sir.
Okay.
Well, we have one letter. Connie, can you go over that letter with Brian about the swim team that we got?
It was an email
The
to
email,
you? Yeah, there was a woman who emailed and basically wasn't happy with us following CDC and Department of Health guidelines on the use of our pool. It seems her children swim for the Dolphin swim team, and they don't feel as though they'll get enough adequate training to be competitive. They're very young children, I would say, grammar school age. So we did respond to her that we're following all of the guidelines that have been provided to us on the use of public pools, and that the children's safety and welfare comes first, and that's for all of the children. So we apologize for the lack of competitiveness. However, we can't change the guidelines because we are strictly following all of the CDC, State Department of Health, and other guidelines that we've been provided. And I think I have to give kudos to the Recreation Department because they've been vigilant about protecting the health of the visitors to the pool, and I would hope that, and I know that, they will continue to do so.
Thank you.
Good. Off topic, Brian, would you mind or just give a review about the trick or treat, where we're headed with that? And I know there were some restrictions that were passed down by the county health department. You guys mind touching on that so the public is aware?
Okay, so we're kind of waiting for some guidance to come out from the state, which it did the other day. So we will be sending out a press release with guidelines for trick or treat for Halloween. Basically, it's just the same type of common sense things that have been pushed since the start of the COVID pandemic. Basically it's wear masks at all times. They gave some options on if you are a homeowner and you wanted to participate by giving out candy. They want you to wear masks as you distribute. If you choose not to distribute, they gave two options. One was to leave a bowl outside, and then one if you wanted to go further, which was to wrap your candy or what you're going to give out individually and perhaps lay it on the table, so that there aren't multiple hands reaching into a bowl. But the guidelines have come down. They're basically, if anybody is sick, either in a household or wants to participate in trick or treat or around someone that's sick, they obviously encourage you not to participate. But there's a whole, I guess it's about a 2-page press release that'll come out later today. It'll be on the Facebook page and the website with all of the things for trick or treat. We are not having the trunk or treat event that we normally have at the Crest Pier for a couple of reasons. Number one, even though it is outdoors, our parking lot at the Crest Pier is still a rather confined space. So social distancing cannot be promoted, and there are some years where we do come close to that limit as well of the 500-person outdoor gathering limitation that's still in place by the state. But mostly because of the social distancing aspect, because we will put anywhere between, say, 18 and 25 cars in and around the Crest Pier parking lot with a lot of people and a lot of kids walking around. We just can't do that in a socially distant, safe manner. So that event is canceled for this year. And we certainly will look to bring that back and/or another similar event next year for the Halloween season. But the borough, I know, wanted to, as many other municipalities in Cape May County, wanted to allow the option for both children and adults who wanted to participate in trick or treat to do so. So we have come up with those guidelines that are basically directly reflective of what the state put out with their guidelines. And again, that'll be coming out later today.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions? Okay, that brings us to our first round of public comments. Just if anyone has any public comments relative to what we have already approved or discussed, feel free to ask away. I'm going to start with anybody on the conference call. Does anybody on the conference call have any public comments? Please give your name and address for the record. Hearing none on the call, I'm going to move to anybody here in the room have any public comments relative to what we have already discussed. Yes, sir.
What was the property that's excess mentioned in ordinance 5?
Which one was it?
Resolution
Oh,
5,
Resolution 5.
it's property meaning like items, so like lawnmowers, things of that nature.
Okay.
Surplus property meaning like things.
Stuff.
Yeah,
Yes.
stuff. And it's
Technical
all listed,
term.
it's all listed, yeah, we have a list of them.
Okay.
Nate, Chris, did you get the name and address?
Mr. Zecca, correct?
James
And-
Beckett, 115 East Hollywood.
Thank you.
I'll ask a second one.
Go ahead.
I have a problem with the way we're talking about old business referendum permitting one consumption license in the business zone. I think that's not quite as transparent as it should be. If I understand this, the reason it's one license is because of state regulations of 3,000 people in a community, get you one license. If a referendum were to be held and a license approved, nothing says that we wouldn't have a situation where if the state changed 3,000 to 500, all of a sudden, without any further voting by the public, there could be more liquor licenses. So I believe this is really a referendum on the Crest wet or dry.
Okay, so all this goes back to the planners involved that we've talked about at the stakeholder meetings and other meetings, the commissioner meetings, and was always discussed as having, the consumption license in that particular zone as submitted by Mr. Brooks, as Taylor Design Group from our planning board. So that's how it wound up as exact as you see listed here. So that's a topic within itself. Can it expand from there? Yes, it could. It could not. I think Solicitor Galzin touched on that at the stakeholder meeting. So, the topic is directly tied to the business. So I'm not sure. What is the request to remove it and add to it, or?
I think we ought to just change it. This is a vote for wet or dry, because once this vote goes through, if the vote were to be held, and I know that you have to get the signatures, and if the vote were to pass, then from that point on, the liquor rules in Wildwood Crest would be controlled by A, the state, and B, the commission, and there's the possibility, at least the possibility, of more licenses and more places without having to go back to the public for an additional vote. So at least in my opinion, that's a wet-dry vote. It's not a vote about one liquor license.
Oh, okay. So where are you getting your information when you say the possibility of more liquor licenses when the state has made it very clear that we're permitted one consumption and one takeout
Yes,
license?
Mayor, I would caution against doing, the commission is doing anything based on what may or may not happen with the state legislature. State legislature could do away with Title 33 requirement to have a referendum. I mean, if you want to go into hypotheticals about what a state legislature can or cannot do, they can change all of the law, including the basis of all of this, which is the referendum statute. That could be changed. So My advice would be to do what the law says. If you're gonna have a vote under that specific referendum provision, which would allow currently the one license in the business zone. To get into what may or may not be possible, I think is an endless myriad of hypotheticals, which I don't think would be good to pose to the public. You stick to what the law says, that's what you vote on, and the answer is what the answer is.
I do want to say that I believe that by changing it to wet or dry, it would be more misleading, and that people might assume that they could have more than one, that we would have bars, we would have lounges, we would have nightclubs. I think that would be extremely misleading, when the fact is, we couldn't have all that right now. We can only have the one consumption license, which is very specific as to what we're, have said is allowed and what we would entertain. I
But the
think
problem
it's just
with
a
the
great way.
statement is the words "right now." Yes, right now, the law at the state level reads 3,000 people in the community. That could change tomorrow to be 500. Right now, with this commission, it's one restaurant. With the next commission sitting there, it could be something else. My point is that once this is passed, there is no longer a fence where the public has a say and has to have a vote to change it. That's all.
I don't see the wording change accomplishes that.
Well, I think we should look for words to do. If we're going to put it on a referendum, we ought to put it on a referendum that's as transparent to all parties as we can find.
The
That's all.
referendum is a public referendum, and that wording's gonna come from the public with the advice of council,
Yes.
from the public, not from the governing body. This is not a governing body referendum, this is a public referendum, it's gotta be born of the public. The petition comes from the public. So how it's worded will be, obviously, have to be certified by the clerk, but it will come from the public, not from this governing body. They're not gonna be wording it,
Okay.
in this case.
And I think, just on that note, the language has to be very similar to what it was in 1940, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
The same question, the statute has not changed.
Right.
The exact same question would be posed to the public.
Mhm.
There's no room to change this.
Yeah, and I and I think that I made mention of it at the stakeholder meeting. So if there's any questions relative to the idea, the concept of the one license in the business district, and frequently asked questions, because we get a lot of those similar questions where people's minds just go crazy with this whole idea. We've taken the time to at least anticipate the questions that we may get, and we provided answers so that everyone knew exactly where this current administration sits in terms of if, again, it's that big two-letter word, if someone steps forward, some brave soul wants to come forward with a petition and they get enough signatures, and if, the second time I'm going to use that big word, it passes at the voting booth, whether it be a mail-in ballot or voting in person ballot, however that happens in the future, it will answer all those questions as to what the administration could do, and inclusive of all the other little details as far as special event permits and weddings and maybe hotel rooms that have 100 rooms and all that stuff. So I think that we've done our best to be transparent, to be upfront as far as how the idea got started, and whether it happens or not remains to be seen. I don't think there's anybody here. If it happens, it comes forward, it'll come forward. If it doesn't, it doesn't. The business district, for example, as I said, will still, go on. The county's still going to come in and do a project, and we have an opportunity to, pretty it up, for lack of a better term, or put back exactly what's there. That's what we're looking at. So, but in terms of this language is concerned, I the only thing I could suggest, Solicitor Gazonis, referendum permitting one consumption liquor license in the business zone. If we added the term as currently permitted by the state, if that helps it or not, but I think that's always been the general assumption. But if it's, if it's something that we need to further clarify or define, I'm happy to consider that. But otherwise, I think we should just leave it alone.
Thank you.
Okay. So that's public comments, first round. Anybody else? Public comments, first round. All right, brings us to discussion. First item on this discussion, summer smokeout. So this is we had talked about this at some point. We did have some correspondence from many folks throughout the summer about the idea of designated smoking areas on the beach. Every year after the summer, we bring it back up to hear from the public once again, and also our department heads. I think I had asked the clerk to solicit the responses from our department heads who are directly tied to the beach and the cleaning up and the health, safety, and welfare of our beaches. Just to remind everyone that smoking is not permitted in any of the parks, but we do allow, as the state allows, for designated smoking areas. So if you've been out to the beach this year, you may have noticed there was some additional signage placed on the back of the lifeguard stands. There was also more visible designated smoking areas on the back beaches as well. We also introduced for the first time on a Saturday, Sunday coverage with the what we call the Crest Concierge, or through the Recreation Department, where they also help remind everyone that if you were going to smoke, that you needed to go into the designated areas. That all said, it's that we have an opportunity, or at least be able to discuss what would happen in summer of 2021. The question that I'm raising again, and it's on here as the public has asked us to reconsider our position on allowing smoking on the beaches, so it's here. I think it's safe to say from the emails that I've read, department heads have asked the governing body to consider and have taken a stance that we as a municipality ban smoking altogether on the beach. I'm not going to beat a dead horse. Everyone knows where my position is. I agree with that, but it's a democracy, so we serve at the pleasure of this board and the municipality. So that said, what's everybody want to know?
All right, my position has not changed. I think we need to give this some more time. We just started with the concierge program for weekends only in a very, very bad summer. We all know how this summer went, and what was happening on the beach, the trouble, the drinking, everything was out of control this summer on the beach. Our beach director said in his 42 years, he's never seen a year like this. I would caution against knee-jerk reaction based on that. I think the signage program, although better, still needs to be given a chance. I want to go on record saying I hate smoking, everything about it, everything. I cannot stand smoking. However, as I stated before, I also don't like government controlling every single thing we can do, and I think giving them a little section on the back of the beach, in my estimation, is still appropriate. I think we have to weigh the fact that when people are against something, they come out, and they're against it, and they want it changed. I get that. Those that are for it, it's all legal, not necessarily as vocal, and I think we have to remember those that are smoking on the beach are not vocal because it's allowed. We're here to represent them as well, and I'm still not willing to vote against giving them a small section on the back of the beach. Let the concierge program work, give it some more time. Last year was the first year, this year just being the second, and I think it's premature to stop it. That would be my vote. I would not vote to stop the smoking on the beach for those reasons.
Commissioner Gould?
I agree with Dave. I was a smoker a long time ago. I wound up with lung cancer, but I was able to survive. And I know what it's like to smoke. The only thing that really bothers me is the smell of pot. I mean, I can't stand pot to begin with. But my God, it was so strong. Ronnie, am I right? It was so strong this summer on the beach. Everybody was doing it. Don't forget, we're in a different pattern this past summer. It was the $600 money. It was people who had all this money all of a sudden. They didn't know what to do with it. And they were buying everything and doing everything. And now the government has stopped everything. There's no more stimulus till after Trump wins the election, God forbid. And it's just, it's just one of those, I'm sorry, just one of those things. So I agree with Dave. I think we're taking their rights away. And if they're asked nicely, I mean, Brian, when you did the concierge thing with the little thing, when you asked people, did they stop or did they move? Did you point them in the right direction?
They were, yeah, I mean, I guess there's still some people who I think there's still some people out there that don't realize that you can't smoke on the beach anymore. But, I mean, most people were compliant. But I also think that a lot of the people that smoke on the beach now do know that they're not allowed to smoke, and I think they try to be conspicuous about it. Where, no one's seeing them and whatnot, so, yeah,
Yeah.
so.
There's another side of this too. It's not so, we have the smoking issue, but the pollution on the beach. So we know we have the Love Blue partnership where they are helping to keep, so I have a conference call tomorrow, but one of the things that I do know is that one of the biggest things that they continue to pick up, even with the designated areas and the receptacles, they just right in the sand. So that's an issue, and I just think that we're trying to develop a wellness personality. I know our green team as well as our wellness committee has recommended to us for us to consider that. So, listen, at the end of the day, it is what it is. It's 2-1, and it is. We'll move forward for 2021. So we'll let everybody know that is the plan for 2021. So that way, at least we get the decision out early so that everybody can plan around it.
There's always going to be those that abuse it. I mean, that's just everything in life. That's going to happen. Hopefully, within time, given some years down the road, we can lessen it, so to speak, get better education out there, let people see it and know it. Maybe more will take advantage of smoking in the back, and hopefully, Love Blue will say to us in a year or two, well, there's still a bunch of cigarettes, but it's not as bad as it used to be. And we can actually help along that lines. I just think it needs more time than just 2 summers to try and make this program work.
All right. Next item under new business is possible ordinance to prohibit bamboo. So this started, I had received an email from a resident that had some concerns with the neighbor having bamboo plants or trees in their yard, close to their respective fence. And lo and behold, and this is how naive I am with bamboo, did some research. Connie had put together, and Trish had put together some other ordinances. I guess this whole idea of bamboo is actually a bigger thing than I even had ever imagined. And it can cause damage to property and so forth. So,
We need a panda. If we got a panda,
I'm in favor of that.
if we got a panda, they could take care of the bamboo.
I had no idea. I like bamboo. I'm like, okay. But anyway, so apparently there are local municipalities that have an ordinance prohibiting bamboo. So the question is, does the governing body want to move forward with a bamboo boom ordinance?
I think this is something too that the green team would be great to look at and do a little, like we can give you the ordinances and have you do a little, talk about it and see what your thoughts are on it. So this is ideally suited for the green team for discussion purposes, and then come back with a recommendation. I personally, after looking at a lot of the ordinances, was more favorable towards one like Linwood has. The problem you're going to see is that existing bamboo probably needs to be dealt with. So that's a tough thing to do, right, in an ordinance, is to say, okay, now we're going to go retroactive and say, if you have bamboo, you need to control it, because the problem is the control. So that those are the things that you really want to look at. It's not just people who might plant it later because it's already an existing problem and can do damage. So that's what I liked about Linwood's. It specifically addresses that issue, and it does, in its ordinance, have repercussions and methods in which to resolve the issues of current bamboo that exists on people's properties. But I do think not to give them more work, because they are really working hard on a lot of great things, but it is ideally suited for the green team to come and look at and give you all a recommendation, I think.
Okay. All right, so we'll move up. We'll keep that under old business, and we'll move move the information and maybe sample ordinances over to the green team. Sam, we're gonna put some more on your plate.
Sounds like I don't like you.
Don't ask for a raise. All right, moving on to old business. Washington Avenue flooding issues.
Mr. Mayor, you still have an item under new business
Oh, I'm
number
sorry.
3.
Possible ordinance
Right.
for
Fire pits.
outdoor fires and fire pits. Ronnie Harwood, would you mind giving us an overview?
Yeah, in 2015, when they adopted the New Jersey code, that before we had rules and regulations where we could stop outdoor fire pits of smoke was emanating in somebody's house, and all that. Well, in 15, they changed that because we're under the national code, which we have no jurisdiction, only 15 feet away from a combustible structure. So with the COVID, and this year was really, Captain will tell you, people were using fire pits, windows are open like a cool night tonight, and it's blowing in the neighbor's house. We can't shut them down for having that fire pit blowing into anybody's property or into their house. This ordinance, thanks to Solicitor Galzunas, we did some research. He came up with a great ordinance, because we have a lot of rental properties here. So people like the fire pit, they don't even get permission from their landlord to put a fire pit out there, they bring it with them. So we ran into some issues this summer. The police handled it very well. We tried to put them out, 5 or 6 times. The one lady said, well, you have no right to be here, but she was only a renter. So this ordinance will give us a local ordinance. When I called Trent to ask them what we could do, they said you have to make a local ordinance now to enforce anybody that has a fire pit that is being a nuisance to somebody. We're not going to go out and shut somebody down because they have it. Somebody has to call us and we complain about it. And I'm sure Solicitor Galzunas can talk about it more, what he did. It's a very good draft.
Yeah, so the draft that I read, just to clarify, so folks that have, say, a chimney, a contained area, there's outside area, there's ones that they sell at Home Depot, but those are permitted, those are,
Correct, you all approved, that's what it says in the code. And it's got the mesh on the top so embers don't blow all over.
yeah, so I know there's a lot of people that have those that would be upset if we were to ban them altogether. But
No, we're not banning them, they can have them. The issue is if the smoke's blowing out and you're living next door, you know how our yards are, you're 15 feet away. Smoke goes into your neighbor's house, why should he can't keep his windows open because you have your fire pit on?
Right.
We can tell them to put it out and move on from there.
They don't have to remove the fire pit,
They
they
don't
just
have
have
to
to
remove
put
it.
it out that night.
Put it out that night if the
Or
weather.
day.
So when it becomes a nuisance, then we can enforce it?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Right now, we cannot.
Yeah, just to clarify that, Mayor, that you're correct, that commercially produced devices designed and manufactured to contain outside fires, like chimeneas and other devices, are permissible. This would regulate placement, would regulate the size of the fire, and open pits, open fires, where there's currently no regulation, are regulated under this ordinance as well. Most importantly, the location, the size, the diameter of the pit, how it's constructed, its depth, and most importantly, a cover, a grating to prevent sparks and embers from emanating out, and also regulates the effect on adjoining property. You have to be so far from the adjoining property, 15 feet, any smoke, ash, or things like that going on to adjoining property can be regulated. As we've heard, there's been instances where smoke has been going onto and into the windows of adjoining property. Police, fire department shows up and they can't do anything about it. This ordinance would put an end to that, but it would still permit the ability to have that fire pit under control and chimney if you like, within the regulations.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? Everybody okay with moving forward on the draft ordinance that the team has put together? All right, Madam Clerk.
We'll
let's have
introduce it.
Introduction on
Yes, sir.
that meeting on October 21st, I believe.
That's correct.
Okay, that wraps up new business. Under old business, Washington Avenue flooding issues, I believe our administrator met with the administrator of Lower Township with respect to some of the Lower Township, and they're getting some information from our engineer to understand some of the water that's coming from lower on down to Washington Avenue. And I know there's still other work that the engineering office is doing. Bulkhead ordinance and lot grading, that's something that I know that we need to start setting up the stakeholder meetings, maybe virtually, Mr. de Blasio. So we can get the information out to all the owners so that they're fully in the loop as to what the borough intends to do along the bayfront. Flood mitigation efforts, that ties into the same. Brings us to the draft ordinance with respect to the garbage, rubbish. I believe that a lot of the plastic bags and plastic straws. We have with us here today our Green Team Chairman, Sam Wilson, to give us a
May I
presentation.
suspend this so I can be clear to speak?
Absolutely.
I promise not to protest you. My name is Sam Wilson. I'm the chairperson of the Green Team that was formed in this borough in April of 2018. So we're about 2.5 years old as an organization. For about 2 years, we were flying pretty low under the radar with some simple individual tasks, getting our feet wet with what this was all about. But we were mindful of our charter, which was to advise, recommend to the government here policies, practices, ordinances, rules, and other matters that would contribute to the quality of life of the citizens who live here now and who would live here in the future. This means that our concerns touch on environmental issues, ecological issues, health and welfare issues, as well as practices that preserve and conserve our resources for the future. One of the things that I asked the clerk to provide to you is a simple little listing here that basically captures the principles of what we're trying to pursue here with regards to the idea of controlling and protecting our environment. If you look at it, you'll notice that one of the activities which we have been very much engaged with over the past year, recycling, is identified as the last option of the preferred behaviors that we should be practicing, enlightened as we are about what we do in its interaction with the environment. We are well aware that the government here is already implementing some of these principles with its current policies in effect with regards to recycling paper and other such things. What this particular ordinance, proposed ordinance, talks about is really the item number 2, refuse, which is basically the idea of going after single-use items that have a negative impact on our environment. Specifically, the ordinance addresses, as do sister boroughs in our area, Cape May, Stone Harbor, and Avalon, an ordinance that basically says we're going to stop the use of one-time use plastics that do not degrade or decompose in the environment, but rather pile up and pollute the environment, harmful to the natural environment, harmful to wildlife, and harmful to ourselves in certain circumstances. It focuses primarily on the use of 3 or 4 key items. One, the styrofoam containers that are used to primarily for carry-out, and other items that are used, they're no use for anything else, they're thrown away, they add to the refuse. The styrofoam is the common name of it, there's a technical name for it. The use of plastic straws, the use of throwaway plastic dinnerware, and also balloons, which are another source of environmental contamination that is particularly harmful to wildlife. This particular ordinance addresses and basically says, and it sets in motion in terms of a timeline. It also proposes a public relations campaign to educate before it goes into effect, so it's not some sort of overnight ruling that basically says we're going to shift away from the use and we're going to stop the use on a date certain, to be determined by the commission, the use of these items, and recommends that certain items be used as substitute. If you want to know of an example, not in this borough, but close to the borough, of a concern that has moved in that direction, the Mud Hen. They use paper products for carry-out. They use paper products even in their own establishment that decompose. And I've noticed that there are other concerns around here that have, on their own or else in compliance with whatever their company policies are, they use such things. This obviously will encourage that transformation. There will be a need for economic change in terms of what you use and what you purchase. The plan also sets aside certain exceptions. The exceptions to the plan, or to the proposed ordinance, clearly provide exceptions for medical use and medical supplies. I'm going to turn to the list here. Let me get this right quick here. Exemptions. The use of these combustible items, thank you very much. The use of these items such as construction projects that use these items, emergency or hospital and medical supply, laundry, dry cleaning bags, bags provided by physicians, dentists, and pharmacists, and bags used by a customer itself inside a business establishment to carry out certain items of bulk, which are listed here. It also specifies that the use of styrofoam as an internal substance that's protected by a coating, like the surfboards that are bought locally and used, encased in a protective, they will also be permitted, they would not be denied. So it targets specifically those things that are in common use that would pollute the environment. Now, this isn't something that we came up with overnight. This was something that developed over 2 years of research and study. We have people come and talk to us. We go out and participate in webinars where information about the impact of this kind of thing on the environment is cataloged and described. Needless to say, in some areas of the world, it's gotten devastating. We feel that with a government that is keenly interested in sustainable New Jersey and the principles of Sustainable New Jersey program, that it would like to consider an ordinance that would bring it into direct engagement with 6 of the 18 major tasks under Sustainable Jersey. 1/3 of the tasks that Sustainable Jersey puts out are engaged by this ordinance. We would get recognition for it, we would get points for it. One of the advantages of complying with Sustainable Jersey practices is the fact that we would earn points. Points add to certain levels of achievement recognized by medals, bronze, silver, and gold. And with that comes the opportunity for grants and money that would come into the government for us to be able to continue to support and pursue quality of life initiatives here in the municipality. We recommend your very careful consideration of this. We're not being zealots. And frankly, we're following what we think has been good leadership that's already been established by Cape May, Avalon, and Stone Harbor. And there are other communities that have adopted this. There is adjustment. There will be those who will feel like they have to go through the pain of moving from one kind of supply to another for the use of their business. But we think that we can accommodate that with both a proper education program, a publicity program put out by the borough, as well as a timeline that would allow for that adjustment. These conclude my opening remarks. I'll be prepared to handle any questions.
Well, first of all, I just want to congratulate you and the committee on a very nice presentation and all your work that has went into this particular draft ordinance and all the other projects and initiatives that you guys have taken on. I know that we appreciate even just everything that we send your way to get a recommendation back, which is good communication.
Well, that's our job, Your Honor, and we're supposed to do that.
It's all good. Listen, it's not like we're doing it for money, right? You're doing it for the love of your community, and we appreciate that.
I think everybody in this room wants to have a future for our children, and that's at stake.
The only question that I have is, just want to make sure I understand, the use of, say, plastic straws in a restaurant. If you're sitting down having dinner and you choose to have a straw with your glass of water or soda or whatever, you can have a plastic straw at that time, or would it eventually, is the recommendation to be a paper straw?
The recommendation is that plastic straws be eliminated from use and that
Altogether.
paper straws be used. This doesn't keep, of course, a customer from bringing their own. There's a market right now in your own unique little straw that you can pull out and use and put back in a reusable. There's a lot of innovations out there that are far ahead of us in terms of accommodating changes like this. Yes, ma'am.
The governor, he's declaring, or he's looking forward to 2022 for getting rid of plastic bags, plastic straws. Am I correct? Would we be,
I understand that that's the case. That's where it's headed. We're perhaps maybe 12, 15 months ahead of it in terms of doing that. But we're also behind communities that have long adopted this.
okay, so would you be looking for us to ban the plastic bags, the straws, eatingware by this coming summer, which would probably be impossible because a lot of these people...
We recognize that at this time, given that this is October and the season is upon us by late April and early May, we probably are behind the power curve on that one, and we ought to be thinking about implementing in '22. But we also recommend that between now and then, that we get some publicity out there about this is important, this is where we're headed, and, you know, here's a heads up. Yes, ma'am.
I would like to say first, Mr. Wilson, what a great presentation you did.
Thank you.
Okay, very well received. I went on before to say that I didn't really want to include the plastic straws, but I see the necessity of it, and I would vote for that. There are people selling metal straws now, or a lot of people already getting them, carrying those that are ecologically aware. So, I mean, I think that's a possibility. The state with their program right now is calling for an 18-month implementation, which I think we should do as well. We have time this year to do it. I would suggest we allow it all next year, next summer, and then going forward after that, the ban would take effect. We could probably follow the 18-month. Also give us time to see what the governor's doing now, because they're talking about a full-out ban, plastic bags, paper bags as well. So theirs may be more involved than what we're actually considering now, and that would take precedent anyway. But yeah, I think this is something we can move forward. I commend you on what you did with it, and I don't really see a problem with it. And I think, you know, the restaurants themselves could be probably selling the metal straws to make up for the lack of the plastic. I do not want to use a paper straw.
Some bright entrepreneur will make a buck on this.
I think, Connie, if maybe the three of us with Mr. Wilson could get together, or with the green team, one of us come in and go over something, so that maybe in January we can send out a letter to all the people that we know who are businesses, grocery stores, restaurants, whatever it may be, takeout, to let them know that this is going to be in the works and that they should start to prepare for it. And actually, you could even make money off of this, because we could make grocery bags with Wildwood Crest on them that they could buy for $1, right?
Yeah, now you're talking.
See that?
Okay, so, and I think balloons, I just want to make sure, balloons,
Balloons are best for the seed.
well, one of the things that bothers me is, I know it's election season, if those yard signs and there's political signs, they wind up, I run that Ocean Drive all the time, and they blow into the bay, and nobody picks them up. It just drives me absolutely
The
nuts.
flags are much better, aren't they?
I don't, yeah, it's just,
Well, the signs could be made out of a different material
Yeah, it's
that would
just-
be more, you know, friendly to the environment. But right now, a lot of them are made out of plastic and they're not
I know that
recyclable.
plastic straws and plastic bottles are all, is Steve Shear here?
Yeah.
Isn't our Adopt a Beach program, the things, our beach cleanups, what are the top things that get picked up? I believe bottles and plastic straws are right at the top.
Along with the cigarette butts.
Yeah, so
Cigarette butts are the big thing, Your Honor.
cigarette butts, plastic. Okay, so I am in agreement with Commissioner Gould and Commissioner Thompson. I think we should move forward. I'll leave it up to Madam Clerk and Connie and Mr. Gazanis to advance that ball. And PR, I think, is going to be the key. I know there's probably some businesses that are going to kick and play a little bit, but I think once they get past that hiccup, I think it'll be all right. And to your point, if it's happening in the state, if we can get an early jump on it, then they'll probably be thankful that we started it earlier, sooner than later.
When are you looking for introductions, sir?
I would say, following up on Commissioner Gould's comment, I think that we have to get the PR campaign out there first, and then
Yes.
shortly right after that, we should introduce it. So I wouldn't mind putting, if we start talking about that ASAP, we can introduce it, say, by the end of this year, for sure.
Okay.
Put it into place. But sooner the better in terms of the grant funding and the money and our community rating system, right? That's something that we need to, sooner the better, right?
This would earn us a chunk of points.
For the
One-third, I think
sustainable
you said?
jersey.
One-third of the points?
1/3 of the major tasks are touched on by this, and therefore it could feed into a good haul and points towards that bronze medal status that would open the door for things that we're all interested in, namely money.
Yes.
Okay, so we already got a bench, which we also have
That's a
pictures
small
of.
start, but yes, we have one.
Okay, so what comes next? What's above a bench? What do we
No,
get above
the
a
bench wasn't part of Sustainable Jersey, that was part of a different program that we were collecting those bags. We're not certified Sustainable Jersey yet, we have to get to that point, and that's what this ordinance would help you to achieve. So that was a different program.
But to
But
answer,
that program can get you points for Sustainable Jersey, right?
the short answer is another bench.
Another bench?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're back to collecting the plastic. We're doing the least option that you see on that page. In the meantime, it's kind of like holding our finger in the dike. We'd like to do things that are have more long-range sustainable impact, but at least collecting some of the stuff and getting it off gives us good practice. It helps the citizens feel good that they're doing something.
I want to tell
It's
you
very
something,
important.
everybody came in,
Yes.
that came in here, was so excited it was there, and Joey Franco was coming in almost every other day to take everything
Right.
out, when you were down in Florida, so hopefully we can get that
Right.
started again.
Yeah, that's something visible, and I bring it in from the pool, because I use the pool regularly. So we have collection points around here, we do that. But that's part of the PR, that's part of the visible thing, and moving in the right direction. This has more teeth.
We'll have Brian meet with them and get some press releases out.
I'd add to your point, you mentioned balloons and you went on, most people don't think about them. We're a shore town, I fish offshore. It's not uncommon to find balloons from not only along the beach, but 50, 60, 70 miles out floating. I would say this summer we've stuck a gaff through at least 5 or 6 of them and pulled them onto the boat. That same area it's not uncommon to see turtles. Once in a while you see a seal. All of those creatures are really susceptible to those balloons, especially the damn aluminum ones. They seem to last forever and go way out.
The plastic bag drop-off, that's at the Crest Pier, correct?
That's one of 5 points.
105? Where are
One here,
The pool,
the pool,
The rec center,
our company.
yeah, I think the fire department,
Yeah, fire department has one.
the rescue.
Okay, I'm not sure, it's, I know, I see the one here in the hall, and it gets filled up
Real
frequently.
quick.
The company that gave us the bench is providing actually the collection boxes.
Nice.
It's part of the deal.
Do we have enough PR out, Brian, on letting the residents know where to drop that off?
Well, we mentioned in the release that we just put out the other day about us getting the bench, that we are now restarting, because obviously with the borough buildings being closed down due to COVID, we had stopped collecting, we are now collecting again. I think our box at the Crest Pier was filled today when we collected, so people do seem to know. But I do occasionally, at least once a month, try to throw it out on the social media pages that we're still continuing to collect.
Okay.
But I know that the one I see every day at Crest Pier is filled every single week.
Right. Okay, and we're due for, I think there's a lot of little updates and so forth, we're due for a newsletter coming up here in the winter time, post-COVID update for everything. So we'll get together on that. Any more projects the Green Team's working on while you have the floor that we need to be aware of? I know Darlene and Mary, we met about a project that you guys are kicking around.
We've put together an action plan. It's about 5 pages. And what it represents, with the help of Connie, who sat down and held our hand for a couple of sessions, she says the borough does a lot of things that we haven't uncovered, and like Easter eggs around here, and she says the Green Team needs to go and find out. I need to have a long discussion with our engineer on several things. I'm getting ready to get his card and call him and make an appointment to do that. But what we have here is we have stripped out, under Connie's guidance, I would say 20 or 25 areas that we feel the borough has already either accomplished, is in the process of doing, or is on the cusp of doing, that we need to capture, recognize, and report, which would automatically give us acceleration and momentum towards that first level goal that we're after. So we organized this, and members of the Green Team have stepped forward and they say, I'm interested in that, I'll run that one down, and what have you. So we actually have a plan, we can provide it to the commissioners if they're interested, that we're trying to follow, and we're trying to do this between now and the end of the year, so as we enter the next year, we begin to load the system up with these accomplishments, and hopefully we'll have some good news for you folks, somewhere along in 2025 in terms of what it all adds up to. One of the things we're contemplating is a green fair that would parallel the health fair that we have here, things like that. The garden, which you personally know about, is something that we're now taking off on with the help of the government and the commission here to do that. So we're multitasking, moving in multiple directions. We have a lot of energy on the team that wants to do that.
Mayor, a lot of the things that Sam and I talked about on that list also intertwine with our center's designation. So a lot of this stuff goes to even flood mitigation and things like that, all tie in together. And it's kind of like 2 programs that run in parallel, Sustainable Jersey and the flood mitigation program. So going through it, we kind of triggered a lot of things for us, like, well, we're working on that for our center's designation, and we're working on this. So when you start looking at all the things that we're doing, you start to see that achieving the points is a little bit easier, because a lot of the work's already been done. We're almost there. So Sam and I identified a lot of areas where we're ripe for getting that bronze level certification a lot sooner than maybe we thought.
We appreciate our administrators' help on this, really.
Appreciate
Very
your help.
helpful.
All right, anything else from the green team? Speaking out? Okay, we're gonna move on. Brings us to the old library. So there's, so that presentation, there's sort of various options scheduled for the next meeting, October 21st, with our engineer and with our architect. Next one is, we already talked about, referendum committee one, as currently permitted by the state. Beach bump outs. We had a teleconference with the DEP with respect to our application. We'll call it phase 2. We received phase 1. So just to kind of summarize that, there's some concern with respect to the design and how it interacts with potential dune areas. So we're working through that. I have an email correspondence that I'm working on to go back out to them to answer or to reiterate our position as to where we stand, and kind of rehashing the last 2 years of various meetings and emails and so forth with the DEP. So I'm not going to raise any concern for alarm at this point, but there is some concern with respect to those bump outs. They may ask for a redesign, or they may very well be okay, but we just don't know yet. Beach walkways. So the access deck, the blue matting, I'll call it, that was on the 5 different streets has been removed. Overall, I think the comments on the new decking has been relatively positive. The only issues that I'm aware of that has been relayed to me, and then through my own personal observation, the sand does come over top of them pretty quickly. It doesn't have the ability for the sand to go down, back down in there. They do tend to roll up a little bit. There's some hardware issues. I had some concerns from some residents that indicated that they didn't want that type of matting on the beach, that they would prefer the wooden decking. So we asked Decor to provide us with a quote. We're waiting on that information, and as soon as we have all the information, we'll be able to compare apples to apples and base a recommendation for 2021. Pump station, I think Mr. de Blasio, you're working on a potential FEMA application for a potential second pump in the Triangle area along Park Boulevard, and also one for the Washington Avenue / the beach outfall lines, correct?
Yes, and we're not sure we received we're going to be getting the funding from FEMA for the first pump station. It sounds as though that might not have been approved by FEMA. We're not sure yet, but it's not sounding positive from what I'm hearing from Triad at this point. Waiting on a definitive answer.
Okay.
We were one of the top 10 going in to FEMA on that pump station and that funding, but Mike Zampino believes that we were not successful.
So
I'll keep you posted.
what they need to do is get a debriefing from FEMA if we were not selected, and then to ask the question, should we resubmit, maybe with some tweaks to the application, or maybe we were, on deck and we didn't get funded, and they're gonna give us some guidance if we should resubmit or not.
All right, that's news at 11.
On that note, I did meet out there with Mark. We went to Forget Me Not during the flooding where it was coming up, checking the sewers there. Some of them flood instantly, some the water's still 2 foot low. And what we saw is that some of the adjoining properties are not necessarily as low as we thought. And I guess we need elevation studies on the properties all along there if we're going to talk raising the roads or what has to be done, but it was not, at least in that immediate area, there's a couple of blocks where the properties are not necessarily as bad as we thought. Same with the road, what we come up with, we need probably 5 inches.
Yeah, I
In
think
that
that
area.
just raising roads in that area 6 inches will have a dramatic effect on nuisance flooding.
Yeah, the nuisance study, I think, came out 50, 60 a year, if I'm not mistaken, but in the last 2 weeks, we had like 7 or 8 times. It's got to be way more than 50 or 60, it's
Yes,
just,
depending on the elevation, I think one number was like 150 a year. Depends, obviously, the lower you are, the more you're gonna see that water.
yeah, and we're not even the low end, Cressy Island up area, that's the lower end, so they must be getting it constantly, but
Yeah.
it may not be as bad as the point I'm trying to make, is what we thought, some of the properties along there.
So the survey, so we had talked about, so I know we had surveyed the bulkheads height, and the next step was to eventually do the streets if raising the streets was potentially the issue. But we're gonna wait on the grant, the FEMA grant application. It sounds like we may have that answer soon. And I guess we need to then have a discussion on advancing that ball. Okay. Special events on the beach, nothing to report. Beach bike path, that is currently tabled. It has been no longer being considered at the state level in terms of this permit. They did indicate that it would be better to withdraw it from the current application that we have for the bump outs, and if we decide to add it down the road, to reapply. Okay, that brings us to our last round of public comments. We'll start with anybody that's on the conference call. Anybody on the conference call have any public comments? Hearing none, we're going to move to public comments for those of us in attendance. Yes, sir.
With your permission, I'll take off the green team hat and speak as a citizen,
Sure.
a happy citizen here in the borough. Going back to the smoking issue, and this applies probably to other policies that affect the beach because of the out-of-town presence that comes and goes. My question to the commission is, what are the plans for enforcement? I heard very keenly what Mr. Thompson talked about, the idea of rights and the idea of giving it more time. And that sounds to me wise, because you have to change attitudes really if you're going to get anywhere with changing habits. But nonetheless, we are in a pandemic, and breathing a secondary tobacco smoke is an issue. It's a health issue. And the idea, not of being overly zealous, but if you have circumstances that even Commissioner Gold talked about in terms of the abundance of marijuana smoke going on, realizing that this year was an aberration, clearly understanding that. How do you intend to enforce what you do wisely implement, or what adjustments? While you're trying to accommodate the rights of the minority, are we in fact going to take appropriate measures to protect the rights of the majority of people? And I sincerely just pose that question.
Right. So the answer, at least what happened this year, so I'll go back to the Crest Beach Services / Crest Concierge. That was one element. I know we have seasonal police officers that patrol the back beaches. Outside of that, it's more of a self-policing and than anything. And honestly, I know that we don't have the staff that would take. We saw the hundreds and hundreds of people out there, and once you get crowds of people, so you can't drive vehicles, so you'd almost need foot patrol to start walking the beaches to see that. So lifeguards are there obviously to keep an eye on the water, and the quads and the trucks that say our beach supervisors, our beach lifeguard supervisors use. It's hard to drive in between, so they have to stay towards the back beaches. So it's not an easy one. I know that that's definitely something that's I think we said from the onset that enforcement was going to be the biggest issue. That whether you go completely a ban or whether you have designated areas, either way, it's an enforcement issue on either way we look at it. So I think we recognize that. So I don't have the answer for it. I just know that our police department and I know our recreation staff have done their level best to do the best they can. But I know the fellow smoker versus a non-smoker, those arguments are going on because we get the emails and the calls about that person doing this and that doing that. And we've been having to advise them if there's issues, you do need to call the police department and then they will dispatch somebody down to address the matter.
I do want to answer that we started out with the concierge team to help educate and start that to be the beginning step. We may find we get to the point where that's not enough and we may need more enforcement. We may have to pay for some class 1s to walk that beach and to do that. to see if it's something where we might get to. We don't know, we're reserving that for now. But we may need to address enforcement further down the road. It was the hope that the concierge service would be a beginning step and the education and phase this in. I think the captain can attest to that and may have some ideas on enforcement, but it may cost us some money. We may have to pay some money to bring on a couple more officers down there. The lifeguards cannot do it. The lifeguards are there to watch water, protect the kids. We're never going to have the lifeguards addressing this issue, as long as I'm here. That's not their job. Their job is to keep your children, your grandchildren safe and not worry about smoking. The concierge service hopefully will be successful, and if not, and maybe we can just supplement that with some class ones at times, and the chief, if he wants to weigh in on that.
Yeah, this summer we did, initial enforcement would be educational purposes and tried to move folks to where they're supposed to be. Obviously, smoking marijuana on the beach, if you were caught doing that, you were arrested. But smoking on the beach or in a public park, because it's allowed by ordinance here in Wildwood Crest, it is a criminal offense. So you could be issued a criminal summons for smoking on the beach. So it's a pretty hefty penalty for if you are charged as far as enforcement goes. But it is nowhere like the commissioner and the mayor said, it's only 2 years old. So and a lot of people are traveling from out of state and have no idea that it's banned here. So we try to educate. Obviously, if we don't get the result that we are looking for and they don't comply, then we have to go further. But a lot of people are starting to understand and starting to use those designated areas. But I mean, it is difficult when the beach is packed for officers to locate where it's coming from. So we're doing our best, and if we have to, then we'll have to look at supplementing with more patrols, foot patrols on the beach, which is something we have to look at in the future if it gets worse.
Thank you.
Okay, any more public comment? Go ahead.
Commissioner, I'd like to thank you personally for the Wild Crest Volunteer Fire Company for our agreement on contract to provide fire protection service for the borough. Only on, we are still the strongest with 28 volunteers group here. With right now we're at 320 calls for this year, which is quite a bit for the volunteers, and our average turnout is 16 guys per call. So we have a good community here with volunteer base still. Secondly, the fire siren is up for the flood siren. It was tested last week. They had to finish up a couple more things for testing, and we're hoping within 2 weeks that next thing will be up and running for floods early warning. It will be, with Commissioner Thompson, every Saturday at 12 o'clock, you will start hearing that whistle for a Saturday test. So we our sister community were involved with the flood siren for 30 seconds, 2 minutes off, 30 seconds for 3 cycles. So when they go, when the commissioners call us or the chief says we need the siren to be sounded for early warning flood zone, you can hear it. I know that. So we're making progress. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Just so everybody's aware, it's not going to be these minor little flooding we get in the
Right.
back streets that we're going to be blowing the flood siren. It's for the more major expected flooding when you'll hear it. So, like I said, we had 7 days in the last 2 or 3 weeks on the back bay. That's not the flooding we're talking about. It will be the more major floodings where you need to move your cars and higher water is expected.
Like Halloween is going to be a blue moon.
Like the Halloween.
Right, so it's a high tide, so.
Okay, so, and Ronnie, thank you.
Thank you.
For those comments, and I know that we all appreciate the volunteer fire company. I think if you look at all the local communities, one of the things that makes the Crest unique and special is, I think, the fire company's interaction with all what the borough does. I think that makes it, just add that little personality that a lot of communities don't have with a volunteer fire group, and I appreciate that, and thanks for all you guys do. Just want to remind everyone also that this weekend is also the Crest Fest Run Fest, so there will be some traffic delays Saturday night and Sunday morning. So the Saturday race takes you down along Sunset Lake from Ramsey Road, down to behind the Public Works Garage and comes back up New Jersey Avenue, so there will be some traffic issues there. And then on Sunday morning, the 10-mile course, the course takes you down Ocean Drive. The bridge will be closed for up until, I think, 9 o'clock. And it takes you into the preserve and back up Seaview Avenue. So there will be some delays, and if you get an opportunity to get out and cheer on a fellow runner, it's been Delmo Sports, who also lives here in Wildwood Crest, his company, has done a really nice job in maintaining and even improving some of the COVID protocols. So you're going to see, a very safe, well-ran event. First one that he was able to put on this year. I think this is probably one of our first bigger events. It's outside and it's socially distanced and people exercising. So just want to give everybody a heads up on that. That said, Commissioner Wool?
Yeah, I have two things. If you're going to be in here and wearing a mask, we'd like to have you cover from your nose down. And I talked to Trish about this yesterday. Our meeting in November is November 4th. It is the day after the election. I'm thinking about the possibility, we talked about putting it on Thursday, because I think there's going to be a lot of people staying up really late that night, and it's going to be tiring to come in here and go through a whole agenda. Maybe we could change it to Thursday. You could think about that day, then Dawn, and we'll discuss it October 21st.
It doesn't matter to me. I'm fine with that. I know I'll probably be the ones up late as well.
Don't think you're gonna have an answer that night.
No, you're not, but I think you still want to be up late.
And I know our clerk will be up late after a long.
That'll be a long day.
But I'm fine with it. I'm fine with moving it to a Thursday.
So-
If I would, the bridge down in the lower end is going to be on October 11th. For the 10-miler is going to be closed from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m.
10, okay. I'm sorry, Commissioner Gould, you said November, so it was November 4th was the meeting, so you're saying November the 6th?
5th.
Oh,
Move it to Thursday morning?
Move it to Thursday.
November 5th, okay, gotcha. I'm fine with that.
Okay. Dave, you're okay with that?
I don't see any problem.
Okay.
I will do a change of date notice.
Okay. All right, hearing nothing further, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.